Riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I'm joined with Quinn Wharton. He's joined me today. He has a world premiere coming up. I'm excited to talk about that. He is a choreographer, a director, I believe a photographer, and a filmmaker. He's got a lot in his background. Can't wait to talk about all of that. So welcome, Quinn, to Dance Talk.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I start diving into your upcoming world premiere, I want to go back a little bit and give my listeners a little bit of a background about you, how you started in dance, what drew you to dance, all those types of information that people love to know.
Absolutely. Just start from the beginning.
Sure.
So I started taking hip hop classes because my best friend did when I was like 6. After school activity, pretty straightforward. Had a great time doing it, really loved to move. And then I was in Seattle at the time, and PMB has an amazing program, dance, where they audition every 3rd grade. And so I got auditioned and I got in. And so I started doing ballet because of that. And then my family moved to Hawaii. Things sort of got a little muddy there because Hawaii, not known for its ballet training, many other, but not necessarily ballet. And then I ended up over a few years getting into North Carolina School of the Arts and deciding to go there for high school when I was 14, and changed my life. It was an amazing school and an amazing time. It was really wonderful. I loved that experience. And over the course of the time there, through summer programs, as we all know in the ballet world, I ended up getting into San Francisco Ballet's trainee program. And from there, got into the main company and danced there for 8 years. And then had wonderful experiences there, had a great time, sort of reached the upper limit of what I was able to do in that company. And then went to Hubbard Street for 2 years. And that was sort of my formal dance career, as it were.
Okay. Wow. I love when I hear all the interesting paths that my guests take on their journey to where they are. All of those pieces make us the artists we are. Don't you agree? Or do you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like a couple of things that you said. First of all, I've heard the wonderful program, especially for boys, that PMB has. I think that they're one of they spearhead their boy program from what I understand really well. I've seen some wonderful partnering come out of PNB, which I applaud them for. And then Hawaii, to take that departure, it's still part of the United States, right? But I think the culture and a whole different experience that you get, perhaps living on island. This is my take on it. Perhaps living a little on island time, a different culture, part of a different culture, learning that culture. But then coming back to the mainland, as I have a friend who's from Hawaii, so he's always like, Joanne, I am part of the United States. I'm like, I know, but I just, it's a different way of life. You mentioned North Carolina School of the Arts. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I hear wonderful things coming, people say about North Carolina School of the Arts, and you said that really, changed your life. Can you talk about that a little bit for the listeners?
Sure, yeah. Let me give you a little. Hawaii was an interesting period. We moved from a pretty normal, neighborhood house in Seattle to a yurt in Hawaii.
Okay.
On 20 acres. So there was this huge shift in my understanding of what the world was, what it was going to be. And so I was the only male ballet dancer on the island.
Okay, wow.
And so I was in this environment that wasn't, it was unique, it was tricky, and it was difficult. Hard to get good training. I did have some wonderful teachers there that we found eventually. But quickly realized after the 5 years that I was there that in order to actually pursue it as a career, which I wanted to do, I needed to file. North Carolina was very much an accident. I've been going to San Francisco summer programs and wanted to stay there without any, not being cognizant of the fact that I was a child and they don't have dorms and there's no support for that and anything like that. So I had gone for that summer. I think this was 2001, the summer. And I had told my father I wanted to stay in San Francisco. And he said, well, I saw an ad for this school in Dance Magazine. I'm going to send a tape there just in case. I was like, sure.
Kudos to your dad.
My dad was a huge champion. I obviously didn't stay in San Francisco because there was not the infrastructure for that. I did get into North Carolina about a week before I was supposed to start freshman year and ended up going.
Wow.
And it was just one of those things, I think, going from Hawaii, where I was definitely an oddball. I was, white. I was a ballet dancer. I was very tall. I was a bit awkward at that point coming, you're in middle school and
Yeah.
whole thing. And I went from being an uncool kid to landing in North Carolina and being a tall Hawaiian straight ballet dancer. And that was a really interesting, weird mental. I was like, oh, I fit in here. These are people I know. These are people doing things that I love. And people treated me very differently because all of a sudden I wasn't an oddball. So yeah, it was a really interesting experience. And then I got folded into a friend group really quickly of dancers and just felt at home in many more ways than I had
That's
before.
what I hear. I hear about the school. Sorry I interrupted you.
No, please, you're good. I think, and then obviously, of course, the training on top of that, training, being able to get all of that integrated in the way that it is there with the formal education, with the dance arts education. It's
stellar. I think it's one of the best programs in the country. I imagine, do you feel that having, that experience in Hawaii where you stood out as different has given you a sensitivity in your dancing, in the artists you perhaps work with, and just in your own personhood? Do you think you're a little more sensitive to people who might feel on the outside?
I hope so. I think, I would hope so. I mean, I think that is up to others to say whether I seem to act that way or not. My mother is also very emotionally in tune and in touch. That was always a large part of our upbringing. Trying to just be aware of what's going on around you with everybody else. I do like to run a rehearsal that way. I do like to run a set that way. I hope that nobody feels uncomfortable or that they feel the space to speak up and to interact. And I certainly feel far more comfortable with somebody once I know more of their inner dialogue and their inner monologue to share that than I do. I'm not a dictator, I hope.
So, well, I asked that question because of what you said, but also when I was looking at your background and looking at some of the videos you have and your films, I thought, what an interesting eye you have. I thought the lens you look through, and I wanted to talk about that, how you see things, because when I'm watching your videos, I felt like, or your films, those clips you have, I feel like I'm drawn into a very specific lens, and it's very I feel like you capture like intimate moments that perhaps somebody with a different eye might not, and I thought that was really interesting. So I'm just wondering if, I believe everybody's background brings them to how they express themselves, but I just found that interesting. So the fact that you brought that out, your background, and then your viewpoint as a filmographer. Am I saying that correctly? Videographer. What do you think about that? What is the lens you look through?
Sure. I think obviously my background is deeply influenced by the career, right? Like I view it as a dancer would view it, not as an audience would view it. So I think that's a huge, huge part of it. I have always strived and wanted to make something that a dancer would be super proud of. Our careers are short. We don't have, particularly when I started, there wasn't so much coverage as there is now. So having validation of the fleeting moments you've had in the world is huge. It's everything. And then I think probably spending, being homeschooled in Hawaii for a period of time, spending some time alone, There is definitely sort of a contemplation. I like the still, I like the quiet, I like the introspection, and I think that's always been a part of the way in which I process the world. And so I think that comes through a lot. And then obviously there's all the sort of visual influences that you pick up as you go of the artists that you've seen that you love.
Yeah, I found it fascinating when I was watching those, and those were just little clips. I was like, oh, this is very interesting. So, so you're at North Carolina School of the Arts, and then it was from there you went to what was
San Francisco.
that, San Francisco first. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like?
Absolutely. San Francisco was a little familiar because I'd gone for summer programs. And, man, it was fantastic. I think definitely always with anything, fish out of water when you leave a place you know and go to a place you don't know, North Carolina to San Francisco. I was very lucky to be a part of the very first year that they had a second company, the trainee program. I got a call as we were driving away from the summer program, I believe. But they asked me to come back and stay. So I talked to my dean in North Carolina. She said, absolutely. I did my schooling by correspondence that year and had a great time. Wonderful teachers there. And then auditioned for Houston Ballet. Got an offer for an apprenticeship. And I told San Francisco, and they were like, all right, we'll offer you the same thing. And I said, we'll stay here. Thank you.
Yeah.
San Francisco has my heart. I love that city. I love my experiences there. I think it's a big company, so there is certainly a structure that doesn't work for everybody in the sort of, I mean, it's the arts, but you could call it more corporate in a sense. Like it needs to have a lot of rules and structure to operate and to function. But I think Helgi did a remarkable job of mixing contemporary and taking risks along with the physical training and the focus and the heritage.
Yeah.
And I just like so many good friends, so many good dancers. I mean, I'm biased. I'm wildly biased, but my favorite dancers in the world.
Are San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I mean, it's exciting. I love when I hear a guest talk about their positive experiences they have, and the love they have for their fellow artists and their fellow dancers and company members. Because I think it's, when you're in a company like that, big or small, you are family. It can almost sound cliche to somebody, but you do become so close. I mean, you are, a dancer's life all day long. You're in that studio all day long, right? And, you're with those people all the time. It's never to say, just like a family, it's never to say you don't have your differences or those moments. But you just, I think there's a real uniqueness and specialness to a dance community that tops no other. How do you feel about that?
It's something I've thought about a fair amount. I think any of us who've moved beyond the dance world experience this, whether they find words for it or not. And it's something that I think I wish was stressed to younger dancers maybe a little more heavily when they're deciding to go down the road or not. The experience in a dance company, if you make it into one where you are supported enough to not do another job, which I know is not always the case, is unlike any other experience you might have other than being maybe a professional sports team, right? Like given your schedule, you show up, you do your work, you're around these people, you're working as a group together toward a goal. There isn't really anything like it, and it is wonderful. It is a unique, magical experience, and there are trade-offs for that. The trade-offs are, you're not going to make a sports team salary, you're not going to be a lawyer, you're not going to have a long career, but you get this experience nobody else gets to have. And I think that is incredibly special. And when you leave it, I think all dancers, usually, unless you stay in the world very closely, seem to have this, I'm not with other bodies all day. I'm not sharing grip and comfort and support, physical support and camaraderie, whether you like it or not. You can't hide behind a screen, anything else. You show up, put your phones down, and you do the work in the space. And that is an experience that has become even more fleetingly rare these days.
Yeah. I like how you talk about that. It is, you show up as a dancer, you are, it's what you see is what you get, and that day, any given day, you're walking in that room just like you do anywhere, but you're walking in that rehearsal space on that class with however you're feeling physically, physically. It's not just, if you're going to, I'm going to say, like, if I'm going to sit behind my computer and say my back is hurting me or my hips sore or what have you, I can prop a pillow there and sit there and I can power through it. But when you have to physically rely on your body, those little aches and pains, or if you're feeling off, you have to like work through that. And it's just like no other. And I had a wonderful experience this past summer. I worked for 7 weeks out in South Bend, Indiana, and I was dramaturg and choreography assistant. And I got to see, these dancers who were showing up every day like that, all day long and just supporting each other. It was a really wonderful experience for me to have that bird's eye view, or I shouldn't even say bird's eye, front row seat every day, going through those aches and pains with them. Because my experience, I started in a modern company, very small modern company, but I had a dance studio for 23 years, which I loved, loved teaching in the studio and all that. But to be in a ballet company situation for those 7 weeks was, for me, was just a really unique experience I'm very, very grateful for. So when you talk about it, it brings me back to that place. And it is really special. And I want the listeners, like you said, and those young listeners who are wondering or curious, to explore those situations and to find what fit is right. You do some lecturing, I read, correct? Do you do some lecturing at the universities? So talk about that a little bit.
Have done.
Have done. Okay.
Yeah, it's not something that I do ongoing right now. More frequently, it was stuff that I had explored in the past a little bit. There were some ideas around physical intelligence versus mental intelligence. We had worked with, there were some business students in the University of Chicago that were interested in exploring the ideas of physical leadership as opposed to intellectual leadership, or the sort of standard leadership. So we did some movement classes with them. I've done some movement work at Stanford.
I see.
I teach dance camera for dancers at Perry. Just teaching younger dancers how to use a camera more optimally to film their work, record their work.
Because it's required now. Oh, okay. I thought that was interesting. And then let's talk a little bit. So from San Francisco was Hubbard Street. Is that where? So talk about that. Talk about that experience, because now you went from West Coast to sort of Midwest-ish, right?
Midwest, yep.
Yeah. So talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I think, and in talking about the upcoming show, the premiere with Baryshnikov Arts, there is a relation there in that growing up, I did both ballet, but my older sister loved hip hop music, so she would play hip hop for me when I was quite young in the car and whatever. And I grew up doing hip hop dance, but never really found a way to pursue it professionally in any sense. I would do it for fun, out whatever. But ballet was the career, and then getting to the end of my time in San Francisco, as most ballet dancers do, I do something more contemporary, something more that is in alignment with my own movement style and maybe cultural moments for yourself. That's the way to put that. And so I auditioned for a number of companies, and Hubbard Street ended up being the one that I was sort of most excited about and wanted to go join. I had some friends there. It was a trip. I think I wasn't ready for a smaller company in the ways they just didn't have as much support. No ill will or shade whatsoever. They're just not.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
San Francisco, it's a very different thing. And I think I had gotten very used to this highly regimented structure and wasn't comfortable with the free form. That being said, like, the work is amazing. The dancers are so good. Phenomenal dancers. Got to do some phenomenal rep. I showed up, and the very first project we did was a Matzak piece, and I got to do this opening solo with him, which was a phenomenal experience. It was a really interesting time. I didn't love Chicago, and I mean, winter, obviously. I grew up in California, so that was just not yeah. It was an interesting time. It was hard and good. I'll say that.
Yeah. My question too, because I know you had that a little bit of hip hop when you were growing up. and then you're out in San Francisco doing mostly ballet, but with some contemporary work in there. But I find my eye, when I see contemporary on a ballet company, it still lends itself to the ballet vocabulary.
Sure.
So, and I came from modern, like a very modern background then into ballet.
Perfect.
So then Hubbard Street, you go into Hubbard Street, which I think has a little more of the actual modern terminology.
Perfect.
As a ballet dancer, a trained ballet dancer, seeing that and having that movement style, and you had a great experience there. What was the transition like for your body to change from that ballet? I hate to say rigidity, but the controlled ballet body to giving over to that free movement that you find. I'm like in my chair here. Free movement with the modern, and modern has technique. I'm not letting anybody think otherwise, but you really you explore your body in ways that I don't think you get to in a ballet company. But correct me if I'm wrong.
No, and I think that's changing, obviously.
Yes.
A lot of ballet companies and summer programs are moving towards having much more diverse styles of training aside from character dancing, and that's it. I think because I kept taking hip hop classes on the side in San Francisco, and because we had done work like Wayne McGregor, and I mean, Forsyth is ballet, but the ideas are much more out there. We did Paul Taylor, having some of those bases within San Francisco and working in that way.
Yeah.
I would actually say the hardest part is probably mental. As a ballet dancer, you know your body well enough that I think you can get away with figuring most things out. But working in a much more cerebral, deeply thought, they just, in Hubbard Street, we spent so much time talking and thinking about the tiniest ways in which you added a feeling to a move.
Yeah.
And I think because San Francisco didn't have the luxury of time and a much larger structure, they couldn't do that in the same way. And at Hubbard Street, I remember getting a very specific comment during the Matzek piece early on where like we had a hand and they kept going over it. They were like, nope, it's not that. And it's not that. It's that.
Yeah. So subtle, right?
And you just spend the time and you dig in. And I think the mental sort of willingness to go there and the fortitude to keep working at it and curiosity is specific.
Yeah. No, I find it fascinating. And like you mentioned, with the ballet world being more open to learning different genres and bringing that for their dancers, I find it exciting, because I love to see it and to see how it works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I have things that I like, I don't like, like we all do. But I find it exciting, and I think it's exciting for the dancers to experience that. I just think it causes growth on so many levels. And so speaking of growth, I find this fascinating, what you're doing, and I want to talk about so Hubbard Street to then what comes next after Hubbard Street?
Hubbard Street, I had already been doing photography for a number of years when I got to Hubbard. I had an injury when I was 20 in San Francisco, so I picked up a camera then, sort of kept doing it outside and with friends and whatever. So I was already doing photography. I had an injury, and I was deciding whether to stay for the next year, my third year there, or not. And I was offered an opportunity by a choreographer that I know to teach one of his ballets to the Joffrey and to go make a film for a friend in India. And it was too much time. I couldn't get enough time off to do those things and to stay with Hubbard. And I weighed the pros and the cons. And, Hubbard's an amazing company with friends, tours, shows, new experiences, something unusual. And I really couldn't decide. And I talked to a friend who was much smarter than me. And we sat down and we had dinner, and she said, you've weighed all of it. I think you should flip a coin.
Wow.
And I said, okay. And so I did. And it came down that I should stay at Hubbard Street. And I was sad. So I decided that it was probably time to go.
Wow. That's amazing.
Tells you where you want to go.
Yeah.
So I took... I went and taught a ballet to the Joffrey, and I made this film. And during my process at the Joffrey, the choreographer came to finish it and to teach the principals. And he asked me to come into the studio to work on some material for something else he was doing. We had a long-standing relationship from San Francisco. And then he said, well, I'm actually going to Russia right after this to negotiate a contract. Do you want to come with me to work on this new ballet? I said, well, I don't have anything else going on. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I read that. And you did work with the Bolshoi, correct? Is that correct? Talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So this is Yuri Pasakov, who is a San Francisco ballet choreographer, dancer there, dancer with the Bolshoi before that, and Royal Danish. He's a phenomenal choreographer whose work isn't done enough in the States. He's an amazing human. He's a wild man, a total artist. And so we ended up going out there and working on this ballet, this full evening ballet based on a Russian story called A Hero of Our Time. And it did really well. We ended up I spent 4.5 months there. I think he was there longer. It premiered, got a bunch of awards, won a bunch of things. And so we ended up going to make 5 more works there.
Wow.
Which was a crazy experience.
Yeah. And so was it, you had to go back 5 different times? Like, did you go back and stay there?
Back and forth a lot. I went probably twice a year between 2014 and 2021. Yeah, twice a year.
What an experience. That's really quite an experience. To hear that, I'm like, that's it. That is quite an experience. That's a whole other podcast episode.
It was not on my bingo card. I will say, the original reason he brought me was to do more contemporary work.
I see.
Inside of it. He's like, I'm very classical. I know what to do. I know how to tell the story, but I want to add a little bit more sauce, as they say.
Do you, when you do your projects like this, do you also document it with your photography and your filming, or you do? Which I think is, I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear that you do that.
To a certain extent, there is also, like, we were in rehearsal for this show at Baryshnikov Arts last week. There's only so much you can do if you're in the front of the room.
Of course,
yeah. You're like, this, that, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. No, so that brings me, I think, or it's going to bring me to your upcoming world premiere of Prisma. It's called, right? Prisma, Baryshnikov Arts, which is exciting. Or is there anything before we get to that you want to add? Because I want to dive into this uniqueness.
I think, no, I would just say, during all of that, I was also working on the photo and film career, and that all sort of dovetails into this, mostly because I met some of the primary artists doing film work during the pandemic.
Got it. Okay, so the people, is that, I wrote some names down. Chris, I don't know if I'm saying their names right, so correct me. Chris Celiz, is it?
Yep.
And Jean, I do not know how to, Shinozaki? Shinozaki. Is that who you met during the pandemic? So, and their background is pretty amazing too. So you're working with the two of them on this work called Prisma, correct?
Yes, there's actually 4.
4.
So we're doing, Shall I start at the beginning?
Yes, please do.
Absolutely. So during the pandemic, as we all were, bubbled up and doing some residencies here and there, tucked away. I was at Kotzebue up north in upstate New York, and this group of 5 beatboxers came through. And with my love of hip hop, I was very excited. I was filming them, documenting them, making social media clips. And we were hanging out backstage at the theater. One of them, Jean Shinozaki, started playing the piano and beatboxing at the same time, and it was really beautiful and poignant. And I went, okay, that's different, because usually people who are into hip hop don't have that side. We started talking, and it turns out he was classically trained in jazz and went to Berklee School of Music for a bit. And I said, oh, interesting. Chris, who is also the unofficial leader of the Beatbox House, which was this group, also was trained in classical jazz, has this background, is a phenomenal beatboxer. And so him and Jean, I asked them if they would make a score for me for a workshop work at ABT.
Okay.
And we did. Went really well. It was beautiful. They were amazing. And they're just the best guys. They're so much fun. It's such a crazy thing that they do. And so in my head, I was like, all right, well, in the event that this became bigger, in the event that somebody wanted a show of this, what could we add to this to make it bigger?
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up meeting at a house party this gentleman, Philip, with this crazy hair, Philip Shigog, um, hitting a cello and playing it and smacking it and like just being very visceral. We got to talking. He has a group with this wonderful gentleman named Jonathan Miran. And so I said, you know what? I don't know. I don't know. But I feel like you guys should be in the same room together. And I feel like something might happen. So I rented a studio and harangued them to get together and got them in the same space. They said hello. They said, how are you? They said, good to meet you. They set up and they improvised for an hour and a half. And it was the best thing I'd ever heard.
Wow.
It's
That's
crazy.
fascinating. Just back up a minute and explain, because my experience with beatboxing is like this big,
Sure.
So explain for me to learn and for listeners as well what that means, what that is.
Beatboxing is the vocal art form that accompanies hip hop that in its base form replicates, augments, creates the more rhythmic beats you hear in hip hop.
Wow.
The
All
driving, steady
Yeah.
snare beat that you would expect to hear in an old school hip hop song. And I would have to speak to them. I don't know the history of it that well. I'm
That's
pretty
okay.
sure it started in the 80s along with pop and scratching and b-boying. It was this art form that came along with it. I know Police Academy, there's this character who's very famous for doing a bunch of noises and being a beatboxer.
Okay.
Yeah, there's examples, and there's actually a fair amount in popular music. You just don't know it.
Right.
Timbaland, who makes a lot of beats, is a beatboxer. Justin Timberlake does a lot of beatboxing. So there's a fair amount.
Yeah.
And then I think the flexibility mentally that Chris and Jean have with the classical training allows them to sort of plug into this other variation of it that is more melodic, more harmonic, more symphonic, in the best way that I can put it. I think for myself, it's a selfish dream. Growing up, trying
vision. It's a vision.
There's these two worlds. There's this like hip hop music that I love that has this funk and grit and energy and aggressiveness, and there's ballet, which has beauty and grace, elegance. And most of the times when people try and put them together, they're quite bad. They're quite tacky, and they don't become a better thing than the thing itself alone. And so for the first time in my experience, to a certain extent, I heard something that felt like a greater sum than its parts.
And so is that how you are brought Prisma together? Is that so? Because when I read the title, and then I went on to read, I expected it to be, and you can explain this for me and the listeners, like a prism. Like I was thinking, oh, I'm looking through a prism, and you know how you look through a prism and it's in fractured light, and you see all these different ways and all, the bending of light, and I was like, wow. And then I'm reading the explanation and the cello and the string instrument and the beatboxing, and I'm like, oh, explain all that to me, and that it's Prisma, not prism. So
Sure.
I find it fascinating. So bring me into that world.
Sure. Prisma, the name itself came from, originally it was just our initials, which is SAW for the different people. And I was like, well, SAW is sort of cool. And then, we were all being very polite and like, well, I don't know, maybe this, maybe that, maybe I don't want to push. My partner we were looking through various, oh God, I'm going to blank on the word.
That's okay.
It's not an allegory. When you look up different versions of a word,
like a synonym, like in a thesaurus or something. Yeah.
Synonym.
Yeah. Yes, a synonym. Yeah.
We were looking up various versions of to combine or to mix or to, you're like a river or a tributary or something like that.
Yeah.
And a prism combines light into a single source of light or can split it and refract. And prisma is Latin for to solve.
Oh,
well. And so it seems good. It's interesting sounding. It sort of fits the vibe. And yeah.
I think you should put that, if I might say.
Please.
I think you should put that in the program, a little explanation. only because, not that people don't understand what they're seeing, because it's okay if they don't, but I just love that. I think sometimes, I know for me, when I go and I love a title and then there's like a quote or a little explanation, it's kind of like that silence before it all begins.
Yeah.
So that's just my thought.
I don't disagree. It's wanting an anchor point to structure
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. So talk about now how you got on the program at,
Absolutely.
yeah, talk about this, because this is very exciting. And it's
It is
premiering in November, correct?
right around the corner. Yeah.
Right around the corner.
Um, so it was, I got the boys together. We did a little improv jam. As it's me, I filmed it with some friends. Shout out to Retrograde Studios. Thank you very much. We got a bunch of coverage, and I said, well, somebody has to see this. It has to. I have some friends at Baryshnikov Arts, so I sent it over there, as well as a few other places. I've been in the dance world for a long time. I know people.
Yeah.
And beautifully, Sonia at Baryshnikov Arts emailed me back and said, this looks really interesting. Why do you guys come to a residency and see?
Right.
So we spent a week there about a year and some change ago, April of 23.
Okay.
And we did, just to see what would happen. Over the course of a week, we made a 40-minute rough work.
Okay.
Which was bonkers.
Yeah.
Had a great time, really enjoyed ourselves, and sort of got to the end of that, showed everyone at Baryshnikov Arts and showed some guests who came in, and we're sort of like, all right, now.
Yeah. We got something here.
We got something, yeah. But then how do we, where does this go? For me, the idea of adding dance was always just around the combination of like if we're mixing hip hop and classical music, mix ballet and hip hop in its movement form as well. Just make this even bigger, right?
Yeah.
So we had a few dancers there, though very unstructured, very sort of improvised. 2 days, 3 days is not enough time to make it work. So we got to the end of that week. It probably, we left, we went our separate ways. We have our jobs, careers, etc. And a month or 2, 3, 4 later, Sonia gave me an email and said, hey, I'd love to chat. And she sat down and said, we really loved what you guys did. We think it's very interesting, and we'd like to do a show.
Wow, that's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I said, cool. Who's it on? What program is it on? Who's it with? And she said, oh no, it'd just be you guys. And I said, oh, great.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
What
an honor. I mean, that says a lot. That says a lot.
It's huge. It's huge. And I think both an incredible amount of trust from them. Also, and I don't discount that trust in the slightest. When you hear the music, it may, like, you can't, it's gonna, I'm not even talking about the show. Like, it's gonna be, it can't not be good, because the music is so good.
Yeah. That's exciting. And I'm excited to hear it. So now it's these two men, correct? Chris and Jean, but are they on the cello or I should say the violin, right? Or tell me what instruments are involved. How about
Absolutely. So it's Chris and Jean are a beatbox duo called Spider Horse.
Okay.
They'll be doing beatbox, soundscape, piano. Chris is going to play the piano. Jonathan and Philip are a group called ARKAI, incredibly successful in their own right. They're a string duet. They tour. They just came out with an album. They're amazing. Jonathan will be playing violin, and Philip will be playing cello. And then we have 4 wonderful dancers, Niara Hardister, Tyrone Reese, Łukasz Zieba, and Cara Diaz. And all of them very specifically are dancers who come from both a classical background and a more hip-hop oriented background.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah, so you're in rehearsals now, correct?
We are in rehearsals now.
And what are those like? Like, what's the day like? Take me through.
Absolutely. We're moving at warp speed. There's doing little time. Basically making a 50 to 60 minute show, and it's a funny thing talking about it before it exists.
Sure.
I'm driven heavily by the music. I always have been.
Yes.
I think particularly with this case, I could throw a story on top of it, but I don't know that that would serve the music. There is a discussion, and I've started to record it, doing some audio interviews with everybody about the sort of personal stories about how they came to this juncture point where they found either the classical thing or the more unusual thing in their art form and why they went down that path. So there may be sort of explanatory personal mythology moments within the show, which is a thing I'm exploring. Rehearsals are, I'm a pretty specific choreographer. I will ask for improv sometimes, but I'm usually pretty direct. So it's really building out group sections and patterns, figuring out the musicians are going to travel within that space with the artist, because I would like it to be fully together. Finding movement that fits the power of the music, because it is huge music.
Yeah.
I would need an ensemble of 100 and fireworks and a dragon to accomplish it appropriately.
Yes.
How do we do that without finding moments of humanity that don't feel forced or kitschy, that feel authentic and genuine? I think it's all of that. And so the days are, we're doing 10 to 5 right now with a break for lunch, and it's the whole time.
Intense. Yeah, which is great. And again, I go back to, how the summer was, working all day long like that, but you had to, with this amount of time, when you're creating a piece like that, or, a whole evening work, you have to work that way. You can't serve the work any other way. But to be so immersed in it, which is so exciting. And tell me, I don't know if you've even gotten this far, but maybe you don't want to give that away or anything, because as you're talking, like, I start visualizing things. What's the what are they? I don't want to say costumes, but what is the costuming like for it? What's that going to be like?
You're asking me all the difficult questions early on. It was funny. Baryshnikov was asking me for information about the show and the program, and I'm like, I don't know what the name is. I haven't made the work. How do I know what the name is? We name it 24 hours before the show. That's how this works. The costuming is an evolving thing. We're choreographing it, so I need to know what they need physically to accomplish the thing, right? I am fairly certain that it's going to go from more structured, covered, to stripped down. Because of the obvious metaphors around putting things away, and the obvious metaphors of connecting with others and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's going to start in sneakers and like streetwear shoes and streetwear clothes, and get stripped down to something that is more elegant and organic. We did a photo shoot and everyone was in all black, which looked really good. I think for the stage, we might not do that, only because of light and loose.
Yes. Yeah.
But beyond that, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, it was just because you were talking, so things are happening in my imagination, as you're talking about it, which I think is exciting. I want to read what it says about about Prisma. So, and you can talk more about that, because you hit on some things you're working on. It says, built around the ideas of origins and personal mythology, the work will explore Genesis moments. Each of the artists involved has a particular and impactful moment where they start pursuing one direction in their life, and their world was changed by a singular moment. Using this frame, they will explore the ideas storytelling has around the personal human journey and growth. Talk.
Man, that sounds good, doesn't it?
It does.
And that's built around these interviews that I've done with folks. I think, right, like for myself, that moment is probably having gone to North Carolina School of the Arts and what that changed for me. For one of the other musicians, it was going to a church like music service for the first time, because he was trying to date this girl and then got swept away by the music, and how he found that. Another one of the musicians ended up dropping out of college, asking for 5 years to find him. Like they're right. Like we have these ideas around what it means to be ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves that are truth.
Mhm.
It or not.
Right,
Their
right.
memories, their figments, their
Mhm.
creations, their mythology. They're
Fleeting. They're fleeting. Hmm.
and they're the stories you tell over and over to yourself
Yeah,
to establish your identity as a person that are very hard to change.
yeah.
But you become this character in a way, particularly when you're on a stage performing for others of that thing.
Hmm.
Um, the tricky thing there for me, right, is I think dance can be a good exercise in storytelling or a vehicle for storytelling. In this show, in this context, I think I'm staying away from being too heavy-handed about it because I think you end up feeling I don't want to. An audience is very smart. I'm not trying to spoon feed you anything.
Right.
So I think the interviews will be structured in a way audibly around the movement
Mhm.
and a feeling,
Yeah, like more abstract, right?
probably.
More, yeah, yeah, because we don't know because it's still in progress.
Exactly.
And I don't want to influence anything.
Oh, please. It's everything. It's all a collage.
It's great. I love the process. I really do. I have to say, I'm one of those people that, I love the process. I love seeing it unfold. Because it's what brings it to life is the whole process. And, when you're sitting there in the audience or if you're standing on stage, but when you don't know, unless you are the dancer on stage, you don't know what's gone into getting to that moment. So to be able to be a part of that process is fascinating because then you're really there rooting it on and wanting to see it then unfold in real time. Will you be using, I'm asking you all these questions. You're like, oh no, will you be using, any film and anything like that? Because again, my imagination is going wild here. Are you
Yeah,
using any of that of your work and your background for that?
sure. I don't think we'll be using projected film.
Okay.
There could be a film component that I
Uh,
am working on.
okay.
TBD. It will
Yeah.
be, it will be, well, it might exist online afterwards, but it will
Right.
exist particularly during the show and
Mhm.
particularly to introduce things.
Yeah.
Still working on that one. It's in the back of my brain right now.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I find the whole process fascinating. And you said there are 4 or 5 dancers. What did you say there were 4?
Four dancers, four musicians.
Okay. And are you performing or no, you're strictly the choreographer?
Totally
Yeah,
not.
because that's a lot if you're performing too. People do it, but it's a lot. Um, when you so far up to this point within the rehearsal process, what are you seeing unfold? What are you seeing the things that, the positives and perhaps the things that you need to perhaps tweak a little bit? Or you don't have to disclose anything. I don't want to be a spoiler alert here.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fine. I think there is always when creating work, there's the scaffolding and then the crafting.
Mhm.
So you create a structure
Mhm.
and you know what works within it and what doesn't, and then you start tweaking and changing that structure. There's
Mhm.
certainly a lot of that right now.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we will continue to refine that. There are some really beautiful moments. The constant question I'm having with myself is between, and you haven't heard the music, so you don't know, but if we have this beautiful string section and a beat drops in,
Yeah.
is it not tacky to immediately switch into hip hop? That doesn't make any sense because
Mm.
it feels against the grain. So are we doing something incredibly elegant and balletic there because
Mhm.
it goes counter to the idea? If we're doing a hip hop move,
Mhm.
how can you then change it and make it more elegant? How can you
Mhm.
make it a little bit more beautiful? How can you maybe
Mhm.
tweak it and add a pirouette behind it?
Yeah.
What ways do these two worlds speak together that make
Mhm.
and don't clash? I mean, they clash.
Yeah.
If they clash, how do they clash well? Or
Yeah.
how do they meld well?
Yeah.
What's the exploration? And the dancers have been doing an amazing, beautiful
I
job.
was just gonna ask you. Yeah.
They're really lovely. Have found, and I don't think that's the case anymore. I think training has changed, particularly actually with competition dance getting
Mhm. Mhm.
as it has. When I was younger, hip hop was not a thing the
Yeah.
LA kids did.
Yeah. No.
And so finding dancers who can really embody both those ideas and comfortably sit in that was
Mhm.
sing. I love them all.
Yeah.
And so being able to get them to switch from sneakers and something much more
Yeah.
than down to a full saute and
Yeah.
pirouettes and all, it's really lovely.
It's exciting. It is exciting, and I think so unique. And so often, we'll sit around and talk about, what, like, you're making come to life something we could have a conversation about. I mean, we are having a conversation about it, but so often we sit and we talk about, what does dance do, or what does dance mean, or what does this mean or that, but you're actually taking that thought, between the hip hop and the ballet and these two worlds, and you are exploring that on stage, which like you said is huge. And I think it's exciting. I'm excited to know how it's going to unfold. And I was going to ask you about the dancers, but you said they're really giving over to that, which that's so great to hear that they're surrendering to the process, because you have to, as a dancer, right? You have to really surrender. I was recording an episode earlier, and we were just talking about that very thing. You become the vessel, and you have to surrender, the body to do the work. This is the one art form where your body really just has to give over. You have to get out of your own way to serve the work. Where do you see it going from here? Or have you not gotten that far yet? Because it's still a work in progress, still in rehearsal.
I have dreams.
Yeah, good.
Sure.
You can share or not share. You don't have to. It's okay to say no to me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we would love to tour the work. We'd love to perform more. I think it has legs too. I think it is one of those pieces. I'm hoping one of those pieces that is more also commercially oriented. While I do love out there abstract art, my work is generally a little more commercial and approachable, for better or worse. And so I do think it has that appeal. I hope that we get to tour it and perform it and show it. I think we could make it bigger. I think you could, how does it sound if you have 10 beatboxers as opposed to 2? What happens if you add an orchestra? What happens if you add a choir? If we have a singer, if we make the dance part bigger, if we add breaking, like there's all sorts of ways you can change the thing and morph it. There is also an idea around, because of the improvisational nature that the musicians accomplish so well, you can easily incorporate, when on tour, local individuals and musicians
Nice.
for certain portions, and I think that could be really wonderful. I think, and I've had this conversation with friends a lot, and I think as artists we often ask the question that is unanswerable, which is why? Why are we doing this? What does it mean, etc. And I think with this one, the biggest thing that I can say, and the thing that I feel and know, is that walking out of it, you will feel both energized and inspired. And I that's the most I can ask for, I think. And so the idea of being able to spread that to as many people as possible is really what I'm after. And I think it's an incredible start. We hope.
It sounds it. I mean, and that's what we want, to be inspired and to keep inspiring, right? That's what we want to keep doing as artists. Quinn, is there anything else you want to leave the listeners with? Talk about, we have the world premiere is happening at the Jerome Robbins Theater, correct? Jerome Robbins Theater, November 14th through the 16th. I have those dates correct?
That is correct.
Excellent. So when I put the podcast up, I'll have the information in there as well. But is there anything that you want, any words of wisdom that you want to leave the listeners with? Anything about career, dance training, anything that you can think about that you'd like to put out there?
Those are good questions. I would say you can follow us at prisma.works. You can find all information about tickets and all that sort of stuff. We have an Instagram, obviously, prisma_works. Any information, if you want snippets of the work and that sort of thing, there will be plenty up there, plenty of beautiful imagery and media, inspirational things about, I don't know necessarily. I think, yes, if there are young listeners, I think just being cognizant of the journey you're going on and knowing that, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's thankless. Yes, there's not enough money involved. But you are trading for experiences you can't really have in any other way. And as long as you are fully going into that, knowing that, it's totally worth it. I wouldn't trade my career path for the world. And it was hard and difficult and frustrating and wonderful and beautiful and amazing. There's all sorts of ways about it. It's an experience unlike anything else, and I think that's probably why we all do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Quinn, for joining me on Dance Talk. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and listening to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey. Follow us, like us, and share, share, share. Thank you.
Powered by Riverside.